Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to week 9 of the Employee Engagement Learning Collaborative at the STAR Center. We're really excited to have you back live this week. We hoped you all had a good week off and were able to access the recording of week 8 from the discussion board, and it should have also come into your inbox. So feel free to let us know if you're having trouble accessing that there, because it's chock full of good stuff. I'm Suzanne Spear, and I am joined by Mariah Blake, again from the STAR Center, and we are happy to have once again Lisa Mosher with Sogent's Training and Consulting with us today, facilitating this fabulous learning collaborative. As I mentioned, we are in the home stretch. We have, including today, we have 4 sessions left, so I hope you guys will buckle up, sit back, and keep engaged with this Employee Engagement Learning Collaborative as we finish up the final weeks here. So let's all finish strong. A couple housekeeping items just to remind you guys. So we are recording this, and it will be posted on the discussion board along with the slides from today. And also feel free to ask questions. Obviously, this is a discussion week, so we are going to be unmuting everybody. A word about that. So you want to make sure that you enter your audio PIN when you dial in. And then also, even if you've entered that in, we're going to start unmuting people. And so make sure that you've muted yourself on your phone, because a lot of people, there are other people in the background and things like that. Just to keep minimal background noise, if you could mute yourself on your phone, we will unmute you through the system, so you can be ready to chime in when you have something to say. So with that, I think that's about it. I believe we're going to start unmuting folks, and Mariah has to go in and unmute everybody one at a time, but we're going to start doing that. So please just make sure that you mute yourself on your phone. And with that, I will hand it over to Lisa.
Thanks, Suzanne, and welcome, everyone. I can't believe that we are already in week 9. Pretty amazing. It's just flying by. And I know that everyone has so much on your plates. I know that I've spoken with some of you over the last week, and if I haven't had a chance to speak with you, we'll be contacting you over the next few days. And just trying to find out from everybody, what's working for you. And is there anything in these next couple of weeks that you'd like to see done differently to make this as beneficial and to help you get as much out of it as you can? Because, of course, we're putting time into this and energy into this, and I know your goal is to be able to strengthen engagement in your department, in your workforce, in your organization to the greatest extent possible. And with that, I wanted to just talk about or go back to a little bit of what we discussed last week and highlight a couple things and then jump into our conversation. So just as a reminder, we were talking about diversity in the workplace and how do we make sure that we're engaging that wide spread of diversity that we have, thinking of diversity in all the ways that we can think of it, not just in the traditional ways, but also just the diverse types of people, types of human beings, types of behavioral styles, the types of communication styles that we have on our workforce. Implicit bias is that bias that's within us that we don't even realize we have, where we're treating people differently because of our beliefs, our preconceived notions about a group that they're in, their ethnicity, their sexual orientation, or just something about them, like their communication style. So our implicit biases are the things that are influencing our behavior, but unconsciously, not consciously. And, the common types of implicit bias are the affinity bias, the tendency to prefer people who are similar to us, the confirmation bias, the tendency to seek information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs and ignores people or information that does not confirm our beliefs, very common. And then the perception bias, the tendency to form stereotypes and assumptions about certain groups that prevent us from being objective and keep us from distinguishing individuals from their group membership and our beliefs about their group membership. So just a little reminder of, that's sort of the key of everything we're doing, is looking at those biases within ourselves, within our organizations, and as we relate to the last week's webinar, how are we doing this within our teams? How are we our implicit biases may be influencing us? What are we doing to make sure that we are aware of what they are and to try to counter them? What are our organizations doing that may buy into those intrinsic biases? And what role can we take in trying to make that better? So with that, I want to start with, were there any general ahas as you listened to the webinar? We had that out there for quite a while for you to listen to on your own because we didn't meet on the 19th. So as you were listening to that, were there any just general ahas that made you go, ooh, yes, I do that, or ooh, I want to make sure to implement that, or that it brought up some thoughts or ideas within you? So I just want to open it up. Did anybody have any real ahas as you were listening to that? Remember to unmute your phone. Okay, and remember, the more you jump in, the more you're willing to talk, that's great. Then I don't have to call on anybody. And it also, we love hearing your thoughts and your opinions because everybody learns from each other. So I want to start with where, as far as engaging a diverse workforce, where have you seen or experienced any kind of an implicit bias within your current workplace or any workplace in the past, where people may not have realized, or the organization may not have realized, that a policy or a procedure or a way of doing something really had some form of implicit bias in it? How about holiday parties? How are your organizations doing holiday parties? Are they holiday parties? Are they Christmas parties? How are you making sure that all of the diversity within your organization feels involved and engaged during the holidays?
Hi, this is Chris. I was going to comment a little bit on bias, but I can touch on the holiday one too. I think our organization has a tendency to just be neutral in everything. And so we don't celebrate Christmas, we don't celebrate Hanukkah. It's very neutral, and there's been a lot of removal of decorations and things like that. And some staff really have a respect for that, but other staff really miss their opportunity to show the diversity. And so I think that there's a balance in it, and there has to be ways that we can express our humility for all of the differences that we all uphold, without necessarily having to not be visual with our beliefs and all of the ways that we're different.
That's really fascinating.
I wanted to,
go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I just wanted to comment on bias because our organization has been going through a lot of this work, and I think part of what we're experiencing, and a couple years ago we had done a big launch and had a large all-staff education in which we really explored bias significantly, and we haven't been able to do as much momentum, and we're starting to kind of gear that up again. But I think part of it is helping all of our staff to be aware that we all have bias, because I think the neutral responses, especially for those of us that work with very diverse populations, we kind of have this assumed of course we're competent in this, and we know what we're doing because of all of the diversity that you see around us. But I think we haven't done as good of a job in really helping all staff to understand their bias, to really be able to individually dwell on that bias and be able to create individual action plans on that, not only as an, I mean, we need to do that as an organization as well, but this is something that needs to start with each individual.
I'm so glad you said that, and it's really true. You know, I know that there's a lot of, and we talked about the Harvard one, there's a lot of those assessments out there on the internet to help people really identify where their own biases are. And, you know, when I do this training in front of large groups, I will often say, you know, be honest. How many of you, you know, feel like you have some intrinsic bias somewhere? And most people don't raise their hands. And, you know, people think that there's something wrong with acknowledging that they have intrinsic biases, and we all have them. So it's great when we can help people to see everyone has them. It's about the work we're doing to identify them and to figure out how we can counteract them. So thank you, Chris, very much. And I'm interested, you know, what are other people doing, you know, both of those aspects? What are other people doing to help people identify where their intrinsic bias is, or where your own is? And, you know, what's your organization doing? And I will open up the question also to what are you doing around holiday parties?
Hi, everybody. This is Jackie. I will say that I know our company, we do a lot of trainings about being culturally sensitive and embracing diversity, and everybody gets the training, but I don't know that anyone really has taken ownership of that. I mean, we are a small company, you know, in a really rural area, and I don't think that anyone's really taken ownership. I mean, we still have our Christmas parties and things like that. And I mean, I think we definitely could be more proactive about being more inclusive. And I think the hardest part is, like Lisa just touched on, is acknowledging, like, yes, everyone has intrinsic, the word just skipped my mind, biases. And it's okay. Everyone, it's all right to talk about it. It's all right to get it out in the open. And I think that's probably the next step for us.
Great. And it's interesting, I heard you say you have Christmas parties. Do you have acknowledged diversity within your health center, you know, where you know that you have people who are of other religions? Or is it a health center that the assumption is that Christmas would be appropriate for everyone?
It's definitely the assumption that Christmas is appropriate for everyone. But whether or not that's true, I honestly couldn't tell you. And okay. It's our responsibility to make sure that everyone feels included without asking, you know, hey, are you okay with this? We need to just make it that everyone's included.
I really appreciate that you said that. You know, I had, my eyes were opened in a little bit different way. When I'm doing face-to-face trainings, I used to say, you know, I'm not sure if I need to wear the microphone. Can everybody hear me okay? And someone came up to me afterward and said, I don't know if you realize that you're doing this. You probably don't. But when you say, can everyone hear me okay, you're making anyone who's hearing impaired identify themselves. And she said, if you could just put the microphone on and use it, then people don't have to jump up and say, excuse me, I have a hearing issue and I can't hear you. And I think it really applies to what we're talking about in our health centers is we make that assumption. And, you know, of course, Jackie, it's not just your health center, it's organizations everywhere of we look around and we think we know. We think we know, you know, what the sexual orientations are of the people around us, or their gender choices, or their military background, or their political backgrounds, or their religious backgrounds, or their ethnic backgrounds, and we don't. And so, you know, maybe trying to put a team together to figure out how to make it more inclusive. And to, you know, certainly to ask people, and I'm interested, are any organizations doing things that are purposefully inclusive And what are you doing? Lots of silence. So let's talk about what you could be doing. You know, I think that's great. You know, both Chris and Jackie were basically talking about helping people to understand that they have biases, helping the organization to understand that we need to not make assumptions and we need to be doing things in a way that's inclusive. As managers in your organizations, take a second and think, what is it that you could be doing? So somebody said stepping up and taking, I guess Jackie, taking ownership. How could you do that within your organizations?
One of the ideas, this is Jackie again. One of the ideas I had, and it's just an idea at this point. We use SurveyMonkey and send out surveys. Sometimes it's to patients, sometimes it's just to the community, sometimes it's within our organization. But the results can be anonymous, and I thought that would be a good way to just send out a feeler like, hey, understanding that there's a lot of diversity out there, is there anything you think, where you've ever felt like you weren't included, or where you felt like we could include other groups or other staff, just to kind of get a feel out there to see maybe what we could start with.
Great. What can you expound on that a little bit? Once you did the surveys, then how were they used and what happened as follow-up?
Well, we haven't done them yet.
Oh, okay.
That was just one of the ideas I kind of thought of to find a starting point, really.
And that's a great idea. And, you know, with SurveyMonkey, people are usually a little bit more willing to talk than they would be in written surveys, because there's less likelihood that it's going to be traceable. And people are always fearful of retaliation, fearful of being honest. So SurveyMonkey is a great place to start. And then, you know, this is a nice way to transition a little bit into stay interviews, because that came up quite a bit also in the discussion board, is, you know, when you're doing your CCSAs, when you're doing your stay interviews, which are, you know, are separate from the CCSAs, but to be saying, you know, in what ways are you feeling included in our department? In what ways are you not feeling included? In what ways do you feel like all that you bring to work is being utilized? In what ways do you feel like it's being ignored? You know, and how can we better utilize we want to utilize all the differences and all the various things that people bring here. You know, in what way can we use those things that you bring? And rather than saying, so you are X, and we'd like, you know, we're making an assumption that you bring this and we'd like you to do that, but saying, is there something that you bring that you would like to share? Or is there something that you see that we're not doing well that we need to be more sensitive to? And SurveyMonkey is a wonderful place to start, especially because sometimes in those one-on-ones, people are not always as willing to be as open, particularly in the beginning. Any additional comments on that? I don't want to walk away yet from holiday parties, simply because when we talk about diversity, that seems to be the one thing that we hear the most about. So if I go into a health center and I say, how is your organization doing on, you know, diversity and honoring diversity, the holiday parties come up a lot as a way that people feel disengaged. So people for whom it's their holiday, usually Christmas, will often say, we have a wonderful holiday party, we have a wonderful Christmas party. And people for whom it's not their holiday will often say it makes them feel very disengaged. So I'd love to hear from other people. Do you have holiday parties? Do you have Christmas parties? And is there an effort, and if so, how, to make sure that you're involving the diversity within your workforce?
Hi, this is Magda. We, in the past, have never really truly celebrated Christmas. What we do is we call it like a year-end celebration. This year, what we plan to do is kind of do Christmas around the world and have kind of everyone do something with regards to the way they celebrated and bring it in to be part of our year-end celebration and then do something like that. So that's something that we're working on currently for this December.
That's great. How are you doing this? Do you have a team put together?
You have a committee, and we actually used SurveyMonkey to kind of see if the staff was actually interested in something like that, and we got a lot of positive feedback with regards to that.
That's great. And how did you put together your committee?
What I did was I actually took, in that SurveyMonkey, asked for people that were interested, and if they were to just contact me via email to be part of the committee.
Great. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions about that or anything else that's been brought up? Or, well, I'll leave it there. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. Anybody else? How are you doing it within your health centers?
This is Emily. Our holiday party is called a holiday party, but it's also called our awards banquet. So it's actually kind of like the previous person mentioned, kind of a year-end celebration of achievements for staff. So it's really it's more about that. It's more about the acknowledgement of hard work of staff over the year.
Nice. And it's sort of, it sounds like it's more open to everyone and not focused on their holidays, but more on their achievements.
Right.
Great. Thank you. Anybody else? I love all the ideas. You know, I think this is great, and feel free, you know, we always say borrow freely. Feel free to take these ideas and take them back to your health centers. All right. So any questions about that? Any comments? Is there anything that your organizations have done, you know, specifically to counteract any bias? We've heard about some training that's been done. Do any of your organizations, other than the ones we've heard about, have committees or specific things you've done to counteract bias? Any training that you've brought in? Okay, all things for you to think about as far as what are we doing, what should we be doing, and how can I as a manager within our organization, you know, I know we have everything from CEOs and COOs and front desk managers. It doesn't matter who you are or what your position is, what can be your role in trying to move the needle forward? And who is it that you need to talk to start the conversation going, and maybe to have a committee put together and to figure out how can this become more of a focus within your organization to make it a more inclusive organization, to have fewer assumptions, and to be making sure that you're using your diversity for good and engaging people along the way. Any other comments or questions about that? Okay. How about thoughts on generational diversity? If you were able to listen to the webinar for last week, you heard that, you know, as we know, the generations are very different, and we can't make assumptions with that each person within that generation will feel the way the generalizations guide us, but they are good guides. What thoughts did you have as you heard us or heard me talking about the different generations and the guidelines? What thoughts did that bring up? And what did you think about? Did you feel it was true, or did you feel within your team maybe not so much? What are you finding? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Who is this?
This is Jessie.
Oh, hi, Jessie.
In looking at the generational ones, I feel like there are pieces that are true for people at different points. But but it is sort of a good guideline to think about when you are trying to figure out how to incorporate those different generations into your work environment, and looking at the practices and the standards of behavior that we have at our organization. They aren't they're very structured, and they aren't as accepting to generations that maybe fall out of the sort of my generation. I mean, I didn't even make the standards of behavior. So we don't allow cell phones with staff. So the generation that wants to text all the time is not even an option because they're not allowed to have their phones on them. Right. It's one of the standards of behavior that you don't have your phone on you. And for the older generation, the email is a little uncomfortable for them. One of our standards of behavior is that you read what we call a daily digest every single day. It comes via email, and that's our one email that we expect all staff to read every day. And it only comes via email. It doesn't come via text. It doesn't come via paper. And so thinking about those and how can we be accommodating to those different generations, but still try and be a lean operation and communicate in a timely manner.
Great. Thank you for bringing that up. And I think another thing that as managers you can all be doing is looking at those standards of procedure. And I know we have HR on the line, and we have, everything, all the different positions, and looking at those standards and looking at the policies and procedures and the way that communication is done, and just kind of setting your mindset that each time you're doing something, thinking, does this work for everybody on my team? And if I've got a lot of millennials and I'm doing it this way, I might want to talk to my team and say, is this working for you? Is there a better way we could be doing this? So great point. Thank you. What else? Anything that came up for you about generational differences?
Jordan. So I am a millennial, and I actually manage people who are in older generations than me. So it was very interesting to me to see how I need to communicate with those generations of people, because it is very different than how I would communicate. I think another thing that I took away from that piece was talking about how to communicate with millennials. And my personal experience was I am often the token millennial who knows how to use Facebook and knows how to use a website, but that's not really what my skills are. So I think as a millennial, it can be very frustrating when that is kind of what's brought to you frequently, because they assume that those are your skills, but my skills are in quality improvement. So those were just kind of my takeaways as a millennial listening to the generational diversity piece.
Fascinating. And I think it's great to remember that just because somebody falls within a group, that doesn't mean we should always be going to them for those things. We need to be checking in. How do they feel about that? And maybe making sure that there are other people who also get to be called on for those things. Thank you. So we're down to our last couple of minutes. Would love to hear from someone else if someone else has something about any of this, generations or diversity within your work group, or something that you've seen that you just want to point out.
Okay, so stay interviews came up quite a bit. People have called me and asked me about it. Sent me emails and asked me more about it. And it's also coming up on the discussion group. So I'd like, the next time around, we'll talk a little more about stay interviews, because I think that that's a strong area of interest for people. If you're not doing them, you might want to go out and just get ahead and start looking on the web. There is a lot of information out there about stay interviews, and they're a great thing maybe 1 week instead of your CCSA, you do a stay interview. And would love to hear from people who are doing them, or from people who would like to start doing them and have done some research. And that's about what we've got time for this week. And as we move forward, I'm not going to be giving you extra homework outside of what we've already got because you've got a lot on your plates. So for the discussion board, please go out. People are really starting to use it. Comment on each other's comments. Ask questions of each other and continue to post. It's wonderful to see people's involvement. It can definitely be challenging to find the time to put new skills, ideas, and strategies into place. That said, strengthening employee engagement is key to the success of your department. So the question for this week, the discussion board question, is what are you doing or what can you be doing to take even a small step forward to implement something that you've learned through this process, through this course, or just something that you know you should be implementing. And please go out, talk to each other on that discussion board. It's a great opportunity, a great resource. The next webinar next Friday is circumventing or overcoming burnout, and I know that's important to everybody. Look forward to talking to you then.